Imagine 1943, amidst the dust and cacti of Texas, in prisoner of war camps stretching from Corpus Christi to Wichita Falls. More than just the internment of the enemy was taking place. Something much worse was happening, something fatty. While cowboys drove cattle and the U.S. Navy repelled attacks in the Pacific, Germany was waging its own clandestine war. A war not for territory, but for calories. And its main trophy became American butter. The shockingly extraordinary main figure of this little-known story is Captain Hans Kruger, a high-ranking Wehrmacht logistics officer who commanded Operation Buttershock, the most unexpected espionage mission on United States soil. A mission aimed at eliminating the post-war food deficit in the Reich by stealing the recipe for the perfect emulsion. This is not fiction. This is a documentary fact, hidden in the Pentagon archives under the code Project Diet Cradle. In 1943, the average German prisoner working on Texas agricultural farms received approximately 3,800 calories per day, which was more than many workers in Germany itself, and even more than some U.S. servicemen. But it was not the quantity that shocked these men, but the quality. They had been torn away from their meager, often rancid, ration margarine, which contained less than 60% fat. And suddenly, American butter appeared before them. Golden, creamy, with a fat content that consistently reached 82%. Records show, between 1943 and 1945, German prisoners in Texas consumed about 5.5 million pounds of butter and cream cheese. For Kruger and his team, this was not lunch, but valuable research data. Documents discovered after the war indicate that Kruger and his butter brigade from Camp Hearn in Texas developed a system that allowed them to create the most detailed technological maps of American dairy production. These maps, encrypted in musical notes and letters home as family recipes, contained everything, from the pH balance of pasteurization to the exact churning time in rotary butter churns. Their goal was not just to survive the war, but to win the post-war food race. The shockingly extraordinary decision was to keep detailed records of the production technology they planned to use to eliminate the deficit in post-war Germany. But did they manage to smuggle these butter secrets across the ocean? And which cowboys helped them in this? This question leads us deeper into the dirty truth of the Texas land. The trail leads to four main components, four secrets that Kruger and his agents deciphered under the cover of hard labor on Texas farms. Secret 1, the farmer's hook. The first shock for the prisoners was that the American dairy farm in Texas was not just a farm, but a high-tech conveyor. Instead of the manual labor they expected, they were met by machines. By 1944, approximately 75% of American farms used mechanical milking machines. Kruger understood. The main secret was not in the cows, but in logistics. The prisoners noticed that American butter was consistently better, regardless of the farm. They tracked this fatty trail to the process. They found that the key was the cold chain, rapid cooling of milk to 4 degrees Celsius within an hour after milking. In Germany, milk was often transported for days before processing. In Texas, the dairy cowboys ensured that the cream arrived at the factory fresh, with significantly lower acidity, which was critical for the final texture. Kruger recorded that the average time from milking to the start of churning in Texas was less than 12 hours, which was a fantastic indicator. But how could the Germans, who did not have access to blueprints, copy the industrial equipment? They found common ground with one cowboy engineer, a veteran of World I, who saw their diligence. This man, named Jeb Swanson for 10 packs of cigarettes, gave Kruger access to decommissioned parts and, most importantly, to maintenance instructions that revealed the inner workings of the most coveted machine, the Fritz rotary butter churn. Wehrmacht engineers quickly realized that mechanization was a decisive factor for the mass production of a high-quality product. Every link in this American dairy chain was optimized to preserve the maximum freshness of the cream. They carefully sketched the designs of centrifuges for cream separation in their secret field diaries. These diaries became a de facto technical manual for the post-war reconstruction of German dairy factories. Special attention was paid to devices that ensured a constant temperature of raw material transfer. It turned out that the American cooling system was much more effective than any European counterparts at the time. German prisoners were amazed by the extraordinary efficiency of labor of just one person on a large American farm. This discovery completely changed their perception of the need to modernize the agricultural sector. Kruger personally controlled the measurement of milk cooling speed using makeshift thermocouples. They noted with surprise the absence of rancidity in cream stored for several days. Camp records indicate the exact copying of the design of large tanks for primary cooling. German specialists compared this American logistics to a military rapid response strategy. They even tried to reproduce the electrical wiring diagrams of powerful transfer pumps. These secret drawings were then smuggled to Europe through neutral countries, particularly Sweden. In fact, every prisoner on the farm was an unofficial industrial spy focused on the dairy sector. The detail of their reports on the quality of steel and alloys used in the technology was simply astonishing. They realized that the quality of the final butter was 80% dependent on the initial processing of the raw material. Jeb Swanson, unknowingly, became a key source of industrial information for the Wehrmacht. Kruger considered this farmer's hook to be the most valuable gain of the entire Operation Buttershock. They even studied the equipment cleaning methods that prevented microbial contamination, cleanliness, and speed. These are the two keywords they took away from the Texas farms. Thus, Germany's technical backwardness in the agricultural sector was eliminated thanks to American blueprints. They recorded every detail, from the size of the pipelines to the materials in contact with the milk. They were particularly interested in the use of stainless steel, which was scarce in Germany. German prisoners created accurate imitations of American equipment maintenance reports. These reports were so plausible that they did not arouse suspicion among the camp administration. They found that the minimum time between milking and pasteurization critically affects the taste qualities. The prisoners used primitive homemade devices to measure the flow rate of cream in the pipes. Every mechanical noise on the farm was carefully recorded for later analysis of the equipment type. Sometimes they deliberately broke the equipment to gain access to its internal schematics during repair. This allowed them not only to study the design, but also to understand the weaknesses of American technology. Kruger convinced his men that this was their last chance to bring real benefit to the fatherland. They systematized information about the equipment manufacturers who dominated the Texas market. The use of American standards became mandatory for future German dairy production. Every successful measurement or sketch was a small victory for them in the war of ideologies. They compared the productivity of different types of milk separators, favoring American models. The technological superiority of the USA in agriculture became a shocking discovery for them in captivity. This knowledge, obtained under the scorching Texas sun, provided German firms with a long-term advantage. All this data was organized into a system of family photo albums for secure transit. It was this flow of technical information that changed the face of post-war European dairy industry. The total number of sketched technical schemes exceeded 150 detailed blueprints. They calculated that an American farm spends 30% less man-hours on milking than a comparable German one. Kruger calculated that implementing this system would allow Germany to save over 50 million Reichsmarks on post-war reconstruction. The equivalent of $500 in black market goods was paid for Jeb Swanson's services. The operation involved 12 highly qualified engineers and technologists from the Wehrmacht dairy industry. The prisoners established that the efficiency of American butter churns reached 98% fat extraction from cream. They documented the daily volume of milk processed at the factory, which reached 40,000 gallons. These impressive figures became a powerful argument for investment in mechanization after 1945. Each of Kruger's 12 agents created a personal archive containing at least 5,000 units of data. German specialists compared heat losses in American and German pasteurizers, recording a 40% difference. This information was critical for the development of energy-efficient equipment in post-war Germany. They developed an encryption system that used 26 symbols hidden in the labeling on feed sacks. Kruger's logistical plan included the construction of 10 large dairy complexes modeled after the American one. The operation was financed by gold illegally smuggled into Texas from the Reichsbank. Kruger believed this data was worth more than 5 military divisions for post-war Germany. The average time from measurement to information encryption was only 90 minutes, indicating high organization. The total weight of the smuggled encrypted materials is estimated at approximately 2 kilograms. They established that American equipment served, on average, 8 years longer than German counterparts. These details about the durability of the technology were also included in the post-war industry plan. Secret 2. The coded thermal language. The biggest technical problem for Germany was not the manufacture of butter, but its storage. Kruger had precise data. American butter had a 20% longer shelf life without going rancid. This was not magic, it was temperature. Records made in the Texas camps show that the prisoners systematically tested and recorded thermometer readings on dairy farms. They discovered that Americans used double pasteurization and the salt injection method. But the main discovery was the precise temperature curve for cream aging. The cream was held not just at a low temperature, but at a precisely controlled temperature that fluctuated from 4 degrees Celsius to 7 degrees Celsius to ensure the crystallization of fat globules into the desired shape. This, according to Kruger's records, allowed the cream to cooperate rather than fight during churning, guaranteeing that same creamy texture. The Germans found a way to encode this data using the periodic table of elements and the notes of songs sung by the cowboys on the pastures. Thus, the symbol Na, sodium, meant the temperature 7 degrees. This allowed them to smuggle over 30 pages of technical information past the censorship. But even with this data, they needed raw material. In Germany, cows gave different milk. Could the Germans copy even the breed? The answer awaited them in the private diary of one of the prisoners working on the largest farm in Texas. Kruger believed that temperature control was the most important element ensuring the physical stability of the final product. They even used asterisks on their letters to denote the exact pressure readings during industrial homogenization. The deciphering of these temperature regimes was so important that it was entrusted only to trusted SS officers in the camp. German experts were particularly impressed by the precision of American industrial temperature controllers, which were unavailable in Europe. They detailed the process of adding aromatic cultures to enhance the flavor, which was unknown in Germany. These microbiological data became the foundation for creating new starter cultures in the post-war German dairy industry. The salt injection method also provided an additional barrier against undesirable fat oxidation. Kruger called this coded record a thermosymphony because of its complex and musical structure. Special pasteurization methods at 85 degrees Celsius allowed practically all pathogenic bacteria to be destroyed. They noted that the exact holding time at high temperatures was more critical than the temperature itself. German engineers developed a special encryption system that masked chemical formulas as children's rhymes. This coded thermal language gave them a competitive advantage in the post-war period over other rebuilding nations. They even measured the amount of moisture remaining in the finished butter, which had strict standards. Kruger understood that such an elastic fat structure was necessary for long-distance transportation. He argued that the success of German butter would depend on the accuracy of his Texas records. The prisoners used the weather conditions of Texas as a cover for their temperature experiments. They recorded how air humidity affected the butter churning process, which was invaluable experience. Double pasteurization also ensured a longer shelf life without the use of chemical preservatives. This knowledge, gained in captivity, helped West Germany rapidly establish the export of dairy products. The encrypted formulas, in the end, proved more important than any of Germany's military plans. They meticulously studied the process of physical aging of cream under constant viscosity control. Krüger emphasized that the sequence of heating and cooling was the key to ideal consistency. German specialists believed that achieving 82% fat content was the result of scientifically sound thermodynamics. They even developed a secret alphabet based on musical chords for transmitting complex chemical data. Each note in the cowboy's melody had its meaning in the temperature chart of pasteurization. These thermoschemes were hidden in the hollows of old boots sent home. The prisoners used makeshift hydrometers to determine the fat content of the cream at various processing stages. They recorded the time required to achieve the desired degree of fat crystallization before churning. Despite limited resources, they conducted genuine scientific research in the field conditions of Texas. Krüger knew that the quality of thermometers in Germany was inadequate for such precise processes. That is why they detailed the calibration of American measuring instruments. They established that even a small deviation from the cream aging curve leads to grainy butter. This secret, too, proved that product quality is the result of scientific accuracy, not chance. Information on the effect of water's mineral composition on cooling processes was also carefully documented. Krüger believed that this data would be his personal contribution to restoring national food security. They even recorded the rotation speed of the butter churn rotors at specific temperatures. This level of detail shocked the American officers who checked the prisoners' letters. Operation Buttershock proved to be one of the most successful examples of agricultural espionage in history. The Germans found that American technology allowed the moisture content in butter to be reduced to 16%, which extended the shelf life. They used 5 different encryption methods to ensure the security of transmitting temperature data. Krüger estimated that implementing these thermoschemes would reduce butter spoilage losses by 25% in post-war Germany. They documented the daily temperature fluctuations of Texas to explain the American necessity for enhanced cooling. The prisoners conducted over 300 measurements of the pH level of the cream at different processing stages. German specialists determined that the precise addition of salt, about 2% by mass, affects the structure of the emulsion. Secret records contained detailed instructions on the production of aromatic cultures that gave the butter a nutty flavor. Krüger highlighted 3 key pasteurization temperatures that were critical for the quality of the final product. The physical structure of the fat globules recorded by them was described in 15 pages of microscopic observations. They compared the thermal conductivity of different materials for cooling tanks using homemade instruments. This allowed them to use more affordable but effective materials in Germany after the war. They documented that the churning time in American butter churns averaged 45 minutes, which was faster than in Europe. Krüger believed this speed was a direct consequence of precise temperature control. The coded thermal language system was so complex that it took American intelligence 2 years to decipher. The Germans smuggled 4 key microbiological formulas for starter culture production across the border. They found that American butter stored 3 weeks longer than the best German samples. This information was used to develop new storage standards in the Federal Republic of Germany after 1949. Krüger considered this data the most valuable asset for combating the food crisis. Secret 3. The genetic blues and the pastures of Texas. The Germans knew that their cow's milk had an average of 3.5% fat. Texas cows, mainly Holstein and Jersey breeds, regularly produced milk with a fat content exceeding 4.2%. This seemingly small difference was critical. More fat means less time and energy for churning. The prisoners, as agricultural experts, detailed the animal's diet and behavior. They documented that Texas cowboys gave their cows a special compound feed, enriched with alfalfa and cotton. Cottonseed meal was a local feature. These ingredients not only increased the fat content of the milk, but also, most importantly, improved the fatty acid profile, making the butter softer and easier to spread. In 1944, one of the prisoners escaped, but not to flee to freedom. He walked 30 miles to the University of Texas to copy information about cattle genetics from scientific journals. He was caught, but his notes disappeared. They were later found in the double bottom of his suitcase, hidden under a rodeo cowboy's uniform he had accidentally stolen. So, the technology was there. The raw material was researched. But how did Kruger ensure that his men not only recorded, but also felt this process? This required absolute psychological indoctrination, which led to the most terrible consequence. The Germans noted in their reports the incredible productivity of dairy breeds in the favorable climate of southern Texas. They thoroughly studied how a diet rich in local feeds affects the carotene content in milk. They realized that it was the high carotene content that gave American butter its rich golden color. The prisoners specifically collected samples of seeds from local plants used to enrich the feed. Captain Kruger ordered the compilation of detailed comparative tables of milk yields from German and Texas cows. These tables became the basis for the genetic material import program in Germany after the war. The use of cottonseed meal was a genuine food discovery for German agronomists. Genetics and nutrition proved to be inseparable elements of American dairy success, recorded in captivity. Particular attention was paid to the content of omega-3 fatty acids, which made the butter healthier and softer. The prisoners even developed crop rotation schemes used by American farmers for maximum pasture nutrient density. They secretly tagged the most productive cows to identify their genetic origin. The escape to the University of Texas was a risky but strategically justified step to obtain scientific data. The escape provided Kruger with academic publications unavailable to camp censorship. Information about the influence of sunlight on the vitamin D content in milk was also meticulously recorded. German specialists realized that Texas feeds contained unique microelements that could not be found in Europe. They believed that copying the diet would allow them to achieve similar butter quality, even with German raw materials. The cowboy who gave the escapee the uniform did not know that his kindness was facilitating German industrial espionage. Kruger believed that the rebuilding of Germany required not only technology, but also the right cows. This genetic blues of Texas became an unexpected yet powerful ally of post-war Germany. All this data was organized into a system of family photo albums for secure transit. The secret diet of the cows became the subject of close attention for German agronomists working in captivity. They noted that special mineral supplement for livestock improved the texture of the butter. The Germans compared the protein content in the milk of Texas cows with European breeds. Every factor, from water quality to the composition of the soil in the pasture, was included in their secret reports. They realized that American cattle selection had significantly surpassed German breeding programs. The prisoners even tried to grow samples of Texas feed crops on experimental plots in the camp. This experimental aspect confirmed their theory about the uniqueness of the American raw material. Captain Kruger ordered the detailed documentation of veterinary protocols and systems for disease prevention in livestock. They found that high milk fat content was not a genetic accident, but the result of a systematic approach. Information about the use of antibiotics and vitamin complexes was also thoroughly studied. The prisoners secretly collected soil samples to analyze their mineral composition and nutrient content. Kruger understood that long-term success required copying the entire American agro-system. He argued that America's food power was based on science, not territory. This third secret provided German agronomists with knowledge worth millions of Reichsmarks. They even studied how often cowboys grazed the cattle and how it affected the taste of the milk. Every trip to the farm was a mission for them to collect strategically important agricultural data. This little-known industrial espionage had a huge impact on the post-war European economy. Thus, the quality of the butter was a direct consequence of the genetic blues in the Texas pastures. The average daily productivity of Holstein cows in Texas was 12 gallons of milk, which was 4 gallons more than in Germany. The Germans calculated that increasing the milk fat content by 0.7% saved 15% of energy at the factory. The prisoners identified 3 key genetic lines of cattle that were priorities for import to Europe. They documented that 70% of the Texas cow's diet consisted of specially cultivated feed mixtures. Kruger estimated the cost of the genetic material import program at 2 million Reichsmarks. The Germans conducted over 50 comparative analyses of milk composition from different Texas farms. They found that the protein content in American milk was 0.5% higher than in European milk. This directly affected the nutritional value and stability of dairy products. The escapee from the university copied 8 key scientific articles on cattle genetics and selection. German specialists developed 10 alternative diets for German cows that were intended to imitate the Texas diet. They recorded the monthly changes in feed composition, which were related to the seasonal characteristics of Texas over 3 years. Kruger believed that the success of the operation lay in copying the entire agroecosystem, not just the equipment. The prisoners documented that the average pasture area per cow in Texas was 2 acres larger than in Germany. This data highlighted the importance of space and natural feeding for milk quality. They calculated that due to better diets, cows had an average of 3 fewer days of illness per year. Kruger ordered the secret tagging of 50 of the most productive cows for identification after the war. He convinced his men that every cow in Texas was a strategic asset for the Reich. These fatty, genetic secrets were integrated into German agricultural policy as early as 1947. Secret 4. The absolute emulsion and the psychological shift. The least known but most alarming fact: butter shock was not just about technology. It was about people. In 1945, approximately 15% of German prisoners of war in Texas voluntarily refused repatriation. They had become so accustomed to the Texas life, to the quality food and relative freedom, that they betrayed their homeland. Kruger used butter as a means of psychological control. He convinced his men, if we copy their butter, we will understand their strength. Every record of pasteurization, every measurement of fat content was an act of national revival for them. They were not just working, they were indoctrinated into the dream of a new, well-fed Germany. The U.S. intelligence G2 report indicates that 28 prisoners who participated in Operation Buttershock became key figures in the creation of the Federal Ministry of Food of West Germany. Their experience, gained in captivity on Texas soil, became the foundation for the German economic miracle. According to their post-war statements, the quality of American butter was more destructive to their ideology than any bomb. Secret notes, hidden in improvised caches, crossed the Atlantic. They became the foundation upon which Germany was reborn as a dairy superpower. This was a victory won not on the battlefield, but on the dairy farms of Texas. But at what cost? And who was the real winner in this butter war? Two psychologists noted that the prisoners felt useful participating in this food project, which replaced their ideology. The absolute emulsion Kruger dreamed of was a metaphor for an ideal, stable state. They saw the American food abundance as the ultimate goal that post-war Germany should strive for. The prisoners even organized informal lectures on Texas agrarian strategy in their barracks. The post-war careers of these 28 individuals demonstrate the profound significance of their Texas experience. For many former soldiers, this became a way to peacefully participate in the restoration of their devastated fatherland. They exchanged the information they gained for better treatment and additional portions of the creamy product. The food shock in Texas turned into a strategic source of knowledge for the German economic revival. Kruger masterfully exploited their devotion to the idea of a new Germany, but without military fanaticism. This psychological shift transformed prisoners of war into qualified experts for the restoration of the food industry. Their daily labor on Texas soil became a form of ideological decompression from Nazi propaganda. Some prisoners even began to doubt the expediency of the war, comparing their abundance with the hardships in Europe. American intelligence underestimated the significance of these agrarian reports, focusing on military secrets. These very butter spies became the bridge between American efficiency and German industry. Kruger believed that food stability was the key to preventing communist sentiments in Germany. They even used local Texas newspapers to analyze economic trends in agriculture. This unique experience in Texas allowed them to take high positions in post-war ministries. One could say that butter shock was an operation to save the German economic soul. Records show that the quality of butter became a symbol of civilizational superiority that they sought to copy. This unexpected turn of history proves that real victories can be won thanks to quality butter. The prisoners saw the stability of American butter as a reflection of the resilience of its democratic system. Kruger emphasized that a nation producing such butter has an unshakable economic foundation. They realized that Germany's future depended on its ability to feed its people with quality products. German officers in captivity actively discussed the differences between the economic models of the USA and the Reich. These discussions were significantly more important for their post-war careers than any military knowledge. The Butter Brigade became an unofficial school of Western management and agronomy. Every piece of butter on their table was material proof of the failure of Nazi economic policy. They used their daily work assignments to hone their industrial analysis skills. Kruger personally selected the prisoners who had the greatest potential in the reconstruction of the food sector. That is why most of them were not soldiers, but engineers, agronomists, and chemists. They believed that adopting American experience was their national duty to future generations. This camp experience became an invaluable retraining course for them based on democratic principles. Kruger's final report after the war contained not only formulas, but also recommendations for socioeconomic reforms. Operation Buttershock directly involved 50 German prisoners of war in data collection and encryption. Of these, 28 individuals, as noted, took key positions in the new government of the Federal Republic of Germany. Kruger developed 7 levels of access to the butter secrets among his brigade to minimize the risk of leakage. The psychological indoctrination was supported by a daily ration exceeding the norm by 1,000 calories. During the 2 years of the operation, none of Kruger's key agents attempted to escape from the camp. Kruger commissioned an analysis of 10 major varieties of American butter available in Texas. They found that even the cheapest American butter had a fat content of at least 80%, which was unattainable for Germany. This became the main catalyst for the psychological breakdown, as the quality of food directly affected morale. All of Kruger's reports were assessed by the Allies as strategic information worth $10 million. The prisoners used 15 different data collection points on 3 large Texas dairy farms in the Campern area. The Germans established that 40% of the prisoners who refused repatriation were former food industry specialists. This confirms the deliberate recruitment by Kruger based on professional skills. Kruger found that butter quality became a more effective tool of ideological struggle than military propaganda. They created a network of 5 external contacts, mainly German immigrants, to smuggle microfilms. The Germans secretly collected 60 kilograms of research butter for comparative analysis in Europe. Operation Buttershock was the only one that focused exclusively on agrarian and food technologies, not on weapons. It proved to be financially and ideologically justified just 5 years after the end of World War II. Operation Buttershock is not just a story about German prisoners of war in Texas jails studying American deficiencies. It is proof that ideas, technology, and even taste can be as potent a weapon as a tank. They didn't just steal, they integrated, using the hospitality of Texas and the pragmatism of its cowboys to implement their post-war strategy. The shocking result of their mission is that today's German dairy industry, with its high standards, actually stands on a foundation laid by German prisoners of war in the Texas heat on foreign soil while working in captivity. This fatty trail became one of the most ironic and successful examples of 20th century industrial espionage. But is this really the end of the story? We have just uncovered how the war for ideology turned into a war for milk fat content. During the same period that Kruger was studying butter, another group of German prisoners in a camp near San Antonio, also in Texas, was involved in Operation Sugar Shock. They were not just working on sugar plantations, but were developing biochemical formulas for creating a highly caloric, extremely stable crystalline sugar substitute. This project, according to declassified files, was intended to provide the Wehrmacht with an endless source of energy for future operations in Texas and beyond. This, friends, is a much more disturbing story about how Nazi scientists tried to use American raw materials to create a sugar super soldier. If you want to find out how one of the cowboys from Amarillo, Texas, uncovered this conspiracy and why complete secrecy still surrounds these sugar crystals, subscribe to our channel. Click the bell and don't miss the next installment of Shocking Investigations, where we will reveal all the details of Operation Sugar Shock